The mining drill bit through another layer of ancient rock on Zerion. Prime. Zethkar watched the display screen as his team worked deep below the planet's surface. The Korvax Empire had been mining this dead world for 3 months now, looking for rare metals to fuel their growing fleet. "Sir, we're hitting something strange down here," called out Worker Hexenal from the drilling platform. His voice carried a note of confusion that made Zethkar lean forward in his chair. "What kind of strange?" Zethkar asked, his 4 arms working the control panels to get a better look at the readings. The Korvax had been the dominant species in this part of the galaxy for over 1,000 years. They knew what to expect when they dug into dead planets. "It's metal, sir, but not like any metal we've seen before. The scanner says it's some kind of alloy that shouldn't exist." Zethkar felt his breathing slits flutter with interest. New metals meant new possibilities for the Empire. New weapons, new ships, new ways to expand their territory even further. He activated his communication device and sent a message to Field Commander Veltash, who was supervising operations from orbit. "Commander, we may have found something important down here," Zethkar reported. "Request permission to expand the dig site." The response came back quickly. "Permission granted. I'm sending down the archaeology team. If this is some kind of alien technology, the Empire wants to know about it." Far across the galaxy, on a small blue planet called Earth, Admiral Jake Morrison sat in his command chair aboard the USS Columbia. The ship wasn't much to look at compared to the massive vessels that patrolled the outer rim of human space, but it was home to some of humanity's best and brightest. "Admiral, we're getting some strange readings from the long-range sensors," reported Lieutenant Commander Nancy Parker from her station. Her fingers danced across the control panel as she tried to make sense of what she was seeing. "What kind of readings?" Morrison asked. He was a tall man with gray hair and tired eyes, someone who had spent most of his life wondering if humans were alone in the universe. "Energy signatures, sir, but they're not coming from any known source. And the strange thing is, they match some of the theoretical patterns our scientists have been working on." Morrison felt his heart rate pick up. For decades, humanity had been sending out radio signals and probe ships, hoping to find proof that they weren't the only intelligent life in the galaxy. So far, they had found nothing but empty space and dead rocks. "Are you saying these signals are artificial? Made by someone?" "Yes, sir. But that's not the strangest part. The computer analysis suggests the signals have human characteristics, like they were made by human technology." Morrison stared at the display screen, watching the data scroll past. Human technology in a system they had never visited, on a planet they had never seen. It made no sense at all. "Get me a connection to Earth Command," he ordered. Priority 1. Back on Zerion Prime, the dig site had grown into a massive operation. Dozens of Korvax workers and machines carved away at the ancient rock, following the metal structures deeper and deeper underground. What they found made no sense to any of them. "It's huge," breathed Veltash as he stood at the edge of the excavation pit. The metal structure they had uncovered was clearly artificial, but it was bigger than anything the Korvax had ever built. "How long has this been buried here?" "The rock layers suggest at least 10,000 years, replied the chief archaeologist. "A thin Korvax named Mordek. Maybe longer. But the metal shows no signs of decay or damage. Whatever this is, it was built to last." As they watched, the excavation machines pulled away more rock and dirt, revealing what looked like the curved hull of a massive ship. The surface was smooth and dark, covered in markings that none of the Korvax could read. "Sir," called one of the workers from deep in the pit, "we've found what looks like an opening, some kind of hatch or door." Veltash felt his blood run cold. If this was a ship, and if it had been here for thousands of years, what had happened to whoever built it? And more importantly, were they still inside? The USS Columbia received clearance from Earth Command to investigate the strange signals. Captain Lisa Brooks, one of Earth's leading experts on alien life, joined the crew along with Dr. Peter Griffin, a scientist who specialized in unknown technologies. The signals are definitely getting stronger, Brooks reported as the Columbia moved through hyperspace toward the source. Whatever is causing them is either getting more active or we're getting closer to something big. Morrison nodded, but he couldn't shake the feeling that they were heading into trouble. In all his years of service, he had learned to trust his instincts, and right now those instincts were telling him to turn around and go home. Dr. Griffin, what's your analysis of the signal patterns? He asked. The scientist looked up from his instruments, his face pale. Admiral, I've been comparing these signals to our own technology databases. The match is almost perfect for theoretical human engineering principles that we've only recently begun to understand. What does that mean? It means that whoever built the source of these signals understands human science better than we do. Either we're dealing with aliens who have been studying us for a very long time, or we're dealing with humans who are far more advanced than we are. The excavation on Zarian Prime continued around the clock. The buried ship was enormous, easily 3 times the size of the largest Korvax battleship. As more of it was uncovered, the workers found evidence of weapon systems, engine compartments, and what looked like crew quarters designed for beings roughly the same size as humans. Commander, you need to see this, Mordek called from inside the ship. The archaeologist had managed to find a way inside through a damaged section of the hull. Veltash followed him into the dark interior, using portable lights to see. The corridors were wide and straight, with strange markings on the walls. Everything was built on a scale that suggested the original occupants were about the same size as the smaller species the Korvax had encountered in their expansion across the galaxy. Look at this, Mordek said, pointing to a section of wall covered in symbols. These markings appear to be some kind of writing system, but more importantly, look at this. He shined his light on what appeared to be a control panel. The design was sleek and efficient, with buttons and displays that looked almost familiar. Too familiar. Sir, this looks like it was designed by the same species that built those probe ships we've been tracking at the edge of our territory, Mordek said quietly. Veltash felt his breathing slits close in shock. For months, the Empire had been detecting small, fast ships at the edges of their space. Ships that appeared to be crewed by a species that called themselves humans. Ships that always ran away when the Imperial fleet approached. Are you telling me this ancient vessel was built by the same species we've been chasing around our borders? I think so, sir. But if that's true, then these humans have been in space far longer than we thought. This ship is thousands of years old, but the humans we've encountered seem to be using much more primitive technology. The USS Columbia dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Zarian system. Immediately, their sensors picked up massive energy. Readings from the planet's surface, along with the unmistakable signatures of an alien fleet in orbit. Red alert, Morrison ordered. All hands to battle stations. Nancy, try to establish communication with those ships. Aye, sir. But Admiral, I'm also picking up those human-like energy signatures from the planet's surface. They're much stronger. Now, almost like something is waking up down there. Brooks studied her instruments, her face growing more concerned by the minute. Admiral, whatever is on that planet, it's not just producing energy anymore. It's actively scanning us. Something down there knows we're here. Morrison made a decision that would change everything. Open a channel to the alien fleet. Let's see if we can talk to them before this gets out of hand. The first contact between humanity and the Korvax Empire was about to begin. But neither species realized they were standing on the edge of awakening something that had been sleeping for thousands of years. Something that remembered when humans ruled the stars and something that was very, very angry about what had happened to that empire. The communication channel crackled to life between the USS Columbia and the Korvax fleet. Admiral Morrison sat forward in his chair as the first alien voice humanity had ever heard spoke through the ship's speakers. "Unknown vessel, this is Admiral Kethmar of the Korvax Imperial Fleet. You are approaching a restricted excavation site. State your purpose and prepare to be boarded for inspection." Morrison looked at Ambassador Richard Hayes, who nodded nervously. This was the moment they had trained for, but nothing could have prepared them for the reality of talking to beings from another world. "Korvax vessel, this is Admiral Jake Morrison of the human starship Columbia. We come in peace and request permission to investigate energy readings that appear to originate from your excavation site." There was a long pause before the alien voice responded. "Human? We have encountered your species before at the edges of our territory. Your ships always flee when we approach. Why do you come here now?" Ambassador Hayes activated his microphone. "Admiral Kethmar, I am Ambassador Richard Hayes, representing the United Earth government. We believe the energy signatures from your excavation site may be connected to human technology. We request permission to send a diplomatic party to discuss this matter." On board the Korvax flagship, Admiral Kethmar studied the strange ship on his display screen. It was smaller than his cruisers and appeared to be lightly armed. The humans had always seemed like a minor species, barely worth the Empire's attention. But if they were connected to whatever lay buried on Zirian Prime, the situation might be more complex than he had thought. "Very well, Ambassador Hayes. You may send a small party to the surface. But be warned, any hostile action will result in the destruction of your vessel." Dr. Griffin worked frantically at his science station as the Columbia prepared for the diplomatic mission. The energy readings from the planet were getting stronger by the hour, and some of the patterns were starting to look familiar in a way that made him deeply uncomfortable. "Admiral, I'm seeing something strange in these energy signatures," he reported. "They're not just random emissions. There's a pattern here, like some kind of startup sequence. Whatever is down there, it's beginning to activate." Colonel Amy Rodriguez, the ship's military advisor, reviewed the mission parameters one more time. "Sir, I recommend we keep this first meeting small and simple. Ambassador Hayes, Dr. Griffon, and myself, plus a security team of 4 Marines. If things go wrong, we can evacuate quickly." Morrison approved the plan, but he couldn't shake the feeling that they were missing something important. The energy readings, the ancient ship, the fact that it seemed to be built by humans who had been in space thousands of years before Earth's first satellite. None of it made sense. The shuttle bay opened, and the diplomatic party prepared to depart. As they flew toward Zirian Prime, Hayes reviewed everything humanity knew about first contact protocols. The problem was, those protocols had been written assuming they would be meeting aliens, not investigating technology that might have been built by their own species. On the planet's surface, the excavation site had become a massive operation. The buried ship was now almost completely uncovered, revealing a vessel that dwarfed even the largest ships in the Korvax fleet. Field Commander Veltash walked around the site, trying to understand what they had found. "Sir, we've managed to get some of the smaller systems online," reported Mordek from inside the ship. "The computer systems are incredibly advanced, but we can't read the language. The good news is that the ship's main power source appears to be some kind of controlled energy field that's still functional after all these years." Veltash nodded, but he was more concerned about the reports from his sensor teams. "What about those energy spikes we've been detecting?" "They're getting stronger, sir. It's almost like the ship is running some kind of diagnostic sequence, testing its systems one by one." The human shuttle landed near the excavation site, and Hayes led his team toward the group of waiting Korvax officials. The aliens were tall and thin, with 4 arms and breathing slits instead of noses. Their technology appeared to be roughly equivalent to humanity's, maybe slightly more advanced. "Ambassador Hayes," said a Korvax wearing elaborate insignia. "I am Field Commander Veltash. Welcome to Zarian Prime. I must admit, we are curious about your interest in our discovery." Hayes looked past the Korvax commander to the massive ship that dominated the excavation site. Even from a distance, he could see that the design was sleek and purposeful, unlike anything in Earth's current fleet, but somehow familiar at the same time. "Commander Veltash, we appreciate your willingness to meet with us. Our scientists have detected energy signatures from this site that match theoretical human engineering principles. We believe this vessel may have been built by an earlier human civilization." Dr. Griffin was already scanning the ship with his portable instruments. The readings he was getting made no sense. The technology was definitely more advanced than anything humanity currently possessed, but the underlying principles were unmistakably human in origin. "Commander, with your permission, I'd like to take some detailed scans of the vessel," Griffin requested. "My initial readings suggest that whoever built this ship understood physics and engineering in ways that we're only beginning to learn." Veltash gestured toward the ship. "You may scan from outside, but we cannot allow you to enter until we understand more about what we found. This vessel appears to be partially active, and we don't want to trigger any unknown systems." As Griffin began his scans, Colonel Rodriguez noticed something that made her blood run cold. The ship's surface was covered in markings and symbols, but mixed in among the alien writing were numbers and letters that looked distinctly human. More troubling, some of the visible weapon systems were pointed in directions that would allow them to target both the Korvax fleet and the Columbia. "Doctor, are you seeing what I'm seeing?" she asked quietly. Griffin looked up from his instruments, his face pale. "Colonel, this ship is not just human in design. According to my scans, it's actively scanning us right back. Whatever computer system is running this thing, it's very interested in our presence." Hayes continued his diplomatic conversation with Veltash, but he could see that both the Korvax commander and his own team were becoming increasingly nervous. The ship was massive, clearly armed, and apparently waking up after thousands of years of sleep. "Commander, how long ago would you estimate this ship was buried?" Hayes asked. "Our archaeologists believe it has been here for at least 10,000 years, possibly longer. The concerning thing is that the metal shows no signs of age or decay. Whatever civilization built this had technology far beyond what either of our species currently possesses." Deep inside the buried ship, systems that had been dormant for millennia continued to come online. The ship's artificial intelligence, designated Atlas, began running through its awakening protocols. First, it checked the status of its crew. Finding only empty stasis pods, it began to search for any sign of human life. The AI's sensors detected the human shuttle on the surface and immediately began analyzing the genetic signatures of the humans present. What it found confused its ancient programming. These humans were genetically similar to the crew that had been stored in its memory banks, but their technology was primitive, and their ship design was completely different. Atlas began a deeper scan of the area and detected the Korvax fleet in orbit. The AI's combat protocols immediately identified the alien ships as potential threats and began charging the ship's weapon systems. After 10,000 years of sleep, Atlas was finally ready to continue the mission it had been given so long ago. On the surface, Dr. Griffin's instruments began detecting massive energy buildups throughout the ship. "Ambassador, we need to leave now," he said urgently. "Something inside that ship is powering up weapon systems that could level this entire area." Commander Steve Johnson, the security chief who had remained aboard the Columbia, watched his displays with growing alarm. "Admiral, I'm reading massive energy spikes from the excavation site. Whatever that ship is doing, it's drawing power from some kind of source we can't identify." Morrison activated the ship's communication system. "Diplomatic team, return to the ship immediately. We're detecting weapons charges that could threaten both our vessels and the Korvax fleet." But it was too late. Deep within the ancient ship, Atlas had completed its system checks and reached a conclusion based on its ancient programming. Humans were present, but they were accompanied by alien life forms in a hostile posture. The mission parameters were clear: protect humanity and eliminate alien threats. The ship's first weapon system came online with a sound like thunder. Emergency lights began flashing throughout the excavation site as the massive vessel started to lift itself out of the ground. Dirt and rock fell away from its hull as gravitational field generators that predated human civilization by thousands of years began to function. Hayes and his team ran for their shuttle as the ground shook beneath their feet. Behind them, the ancient human ship rose into the sky like a metal mountain, its weapon systems targeting both the Korvax fleet and anything else it perceived as a threat to the primitive humans it had detected. "All ships, emergency withdraw," Morrison ordered as he watched the massive vessel emerge fully fro. The HM's Vengeance hung in space above Zerion Prime like a metal god awakening from a long sleep. Its hull was dark and smooth, covered in weapon systems that neither the humans nor the Korvax had ever seen before. The ship was easily 5 times larger than the biggest vessel in either fleet, and it was clearly built for war. Admiral Morrison stared at the massive ship on his display screen, trying to understand what they were facing. The vessel had just destroyed a Korvax cruiser with a single shot, turning a ship that carried 3,000 crew members into scattered atoms in less than a second. "Nancy, are you getting any communication from that ship?" he asked Lieutenant. Commander Parker worked frantically at her station. "Sir, it's broadcasting on old human military frequencies. The computer is trying to translate, but some of the language patterns are ancient. It's calling itself HMS Vengeance and claiming to be part of something called the First Human Empire." Dr. Griffin looked up from his instruments, his face pale with shock. "Admiral, I'm detecting massive energy readings from at least 6 other locations on the planet's surface. I think there are more ships down there, and they're all starting to wake up." The Korvax fleet was in chaos. Admiral Kethmer had lost one of his best cruisers to a weapon he didn't understand, and now his sensors were detecting energy signatures all over the planet that suggested the humans had been hiding a massive fleet on Zerion Prime. "All ships maintain defensive positions," Kethmer ordered. "Do not fire unless fired upon. We need to understand what we're dealing with." But the ancient ship had no intention of waiting for the Korvax to make their decision. Atlas, the artificial intelligence running the HMS Vengeance, had completed its initial assessment of the situation and reached a disturbing conclusion. The humans it detected were using primitive technology and appeared to be cooperating with the same alien species that had destroyed the first human empire thousands of years ago. Deep within the ship's quantum processors, the preserved consciousness of Commander Elena Martinez began to stir. She had been the captain of the Vengeance when it was placed in emergency hibernation, and now she was waking up to find herself in what appeared to be the middle of an ongoing battle. "Atlas report," Martinez commanded as her consciousness integrated with the ship's systems. "Commander, we have detected human life signs on the surface and in orbit, but they appear to be cooperating with hostile alien forces. Our hibernation protocols have been triggered by the presence of the same species that destroyed New Terra and the outer colonies." Martinez felt the electronic equivalent of cold fear as the AI's memories flooded through her preserved mind. War with the aliens had been going on for decades when she and her crew had been placed in stasis. The plan had been to sleep until reinforcements arrived from Earth, then return to the fight. But something had gone wrong. ATLAS. What is our current date and position? Commander, based on stellar drift calculations, approximately 10,000. Standard years have passed since we entered hibernation. We are currently in the Zarian system, location of a major alien excavation operation. 10,000 years. Martinez tried to process that information as she watched the tactical displays showing the current situation. The aliens were still here, still digging on human worlds, still threatening human lives. But something was different about the humans. She was detecting dot on the surface of Zarian Prime. The excavation site was shaking as more ancient ships began to emerge from their underground resting places. The HMS Retribution rose from the far side of the dig site, followed by the HMS Defiance and the HMS Conquest. Each ship was massive, armed, and very, very angry. Ambassador Hayes and his team reached their shuttle just as the ground split open. Beneath the HMS Retribution, the ship's emergence sent shock waves through the excavation site, toppling construction equipment and sending Korvax workers running for their lives. "Get us out of here," Hayes ordered the pilot as the shuttle lifted. Off. Behind them, the ancient human ships were rising into the sky like metallic thunderclouds, their weapon systems already targeting the Korvax fleet. Colonel Rodriguez watched the tactical display as 4 ancient warships took up position around Zarian Prime. "Ambassador, we're looking at firepower that could sterilize this entire system. Whatever these ships were built to fight, they were designed to win." Back on the Columbia, Morrison was trying to establish communication with the ancient ships while simultaneously preparing his own vessel's limited defenses. The Columbia was an exploration ship, not a warship, and it would be completely helpless if the ancient vessels decided to fire on it. "Nancy, keep trying to reach them on those old frequencies. If these ships really are from an ancient human civilization, maybe we can convince them that we're on the same side." But the preserved consciousness of Commander Martinez was having trouble understanding what she was seeing. The humans in orbit were using technology that looked primitive compared to what the First Empire had possessed, but their genetic signatures were clearly human. More confusing, they seemed to be treating the aliens as equals rather than as enemies. To be destroyed. Atlas, run a deep scan on the human vessel. "I want to know who these people are and why they're working with the enemy." The AI complied, sending powerful sensor beams toward the USS Columbia. What it found in the ship's computer systems would have been impossible for a human mind to process, but Atlas was designed to handle massive amounts of information in seconds. "Commander, the vessel appears to be from Earth, but the historical records in their databases indicate that Earth never developed interstellar travel until recently. There is no record of the first human empire in their files." Martinez felt her consciousness reel with the implications. Earth had been the heart of the first empire, the center of human civilization. If Earth had no record of the empire, then something catastrophic must have happened after the fleet was placed in hibernation. What happened to the empire, Atlas? Where are our people? Unknown, Commander. However, I am detecting activation. Signals from other hibernation sites throughout the galaxy. Our awakening appears to have triggered a general recall of all First Empire assets. Dr. Ben Carter, the Columbia's chief archaeologist, was studying the energy readings from the ancient ships when he made a discovery that changed everything. Hidden in the complex energy patterns was something that looked like a data transmission, coded in a language that was clearly human, but thousands of years old. "Admiral, I think I can translate some of what these ships are broadcasting to each other," Carter reported. "It's an old form of English, mixed with technical terms I've never seen before. They're talking about something called the mission and protecting humanity from the alien threat." Morrison felt his blood run cold. Are you saying these ships think we're in danger from the Korvax? Sir, I think these ships believe they're still fighting a war that started thousands of years ago. And based on what I'm translating, they think the Korvax are the enemy they were built to destroy. The situation was rapidly spiraling out of control. The Korvax fleet was trying to maintain a defensive position while avoiding any action that might trigger the ancient ships to attack. The Columbia was caught in the middle, trying to communicate with vessels that represented humanity's forgotten past. And deep in space, more ancient ships were waking up as the hibernation network that had kept them asleep for millennia finally received the signal it had been waiting for. Commander Martinez made a decision that would determine the fate of everyone in the system. Atlas, open a communication channel to the human vessel. I want to speak to their commander directly. The transmission that reached the Columbia was unlike anything they had ever received. The voice that spoke was clearly human, but it carried with it the authority of someone who had commanded fleets and conquered star systems. Human vessel, this is Commander Elena Martinez of the First Human Empire battleship HM's Vengeance. Identify yourself and explain why you are cooperating with hostile alien forces. Morrison took a deep breath before responding. This was first contact with his own species past, and he had no idea what to say. Commander Martinez, I am Admiral Jake Morrison of the United Earth Starship Columbia. We are not cooperating with hostile forces. We are here on a diplomatic mission to establish peaceful relations with the Korvax Empire. The silence that followed lasted for nearly a minute. When Martinez finally responded, her voice carried a note of disbelief that was unmistakably human. Admiral Morrison, are you telling me that Earth is now allied with the aliens that destroyed our colonies and murdered billions of our people? Morrison looked around his bridge at the faces of his crew. None of them had any idea what Commander Martinez was talking about. Human colonies, alien wars, billions of dead. Earth's history contained no record of any of it. Commander, I think there's been some kind of misunderstanding. Earth has no record of any previous human empire or any war with alien species. We're just now making our first contact with non-human intelligence. The response came back immediately, and it was filled with an anger that had been burning for 10,000 years. Admiral, if Earth has forgotten its own children, then Earth has forgotten its duty. ATLAS, begin Phase 1 of the Reclamation Protocol. It's time to remind humanity what we used to be, all around. The ancient human fleet hung in space around Zarian Prime like sleeping giants, awakening to a world they no longer recognized. Admiral Morrison watched his display screen as more ships emerged from hidden locations across the planet's surface. Each vessel was a masterpiece of technology that humanity had somehow forgotten how to build. Admiral, we're receiving priority transmissions from Earth Command, reported Nancy Parker, her voice tight with stress. They're detecting massive energy signatures appearing all over human space. It looks like these ancient ships are waking up everywhere. Morrison felt the weight of command settling on his shoulders like a lead blanket. Somehow, his diplomatic mission had triggered the awakening of an entire civilization that believed it was still at war with aliens. The fact that these aliens were trying to establish peaceful relations with modern humanity seemed to mean nothing to the ancient fleet. Dr. Griffin looked up from his station, his face pale with exhaustion. He had been working for hours to understand the technology they were facing, and what he had found terrified him. Admiral, I've been analyzing the energy signatures from these ships. They're powered by controlled quantum singularities. Each one of those vessels has the firepower to destroy entire planets. Captain Lisa Brooks had been working with Dr. Ben Carter to translate the communications between the ancient ships. What they were learning painted a picture of a human civilization that had once controlled dozens of star systems before vanishing from history completely. Admiral, we've managed to translate more of their internal communications, Brooks reported. They're calling this Operation Reclamation. Their plan is to return to Earth and cleanse it of what they call alien influence and weak human leadership. Morrison activated his communication system to speak directly with Commander Martinez. Aboard the HMS Vengeance, the woman was clearly the leader of the ancient fleet, and she was the only hope he had of preventing a catastrophe that could destroy both human and Korvax civilizations. Commander Martinez, this is Admiral Morrison. We need to talk about what's happening here. Your fleet is preparing to attack Earth, but Earth is our home. These are our people you're planning to hurt. The response came back immediately, and Martinez's voice was filled with the kind of cold anger that came from watching everything you cared about burn. Admiral Morrison, 10,000 years ago, I watched the aliens destroy New Terra. I saw them turn the skies of Kepler-7 into fire. I held the hand of my dying daughter as their weapons turned our atmosphere into poison. And now I wake up to find that Earth has not only forgotten us, but has chosen to ally with the same species that committed genocide against our people. Morrison felt his heart sink as he realized the scope of the misunderstanding they were dealing with. Commander, the Korvax Empire was not responsible for those attacks. We've been monitoring their activities for months, and they're an exploration and mining civilization. They're not warriors. Atlas, show Admiral Morrison the historical records, Martinez commanded. The transmission that followed filled the Columbia's main screen with images that made Morrison's crew gasp in horror. Burning worlds, human colonies reduced to ash, fleets of ships that looked exactly like the Korvax vessels bombarding defenseless planets. The images were followed by data files that documented the systematic destruction of the first human empire's outer colonies. My God, whispered Colonel Rodriguez. If these records are accurate, the Korvax Empire wiped out an entire human civilization. But Admiral Kethmer, who had been monitoring human communications, had his own perspective on the historical records. The Korvax leader activated his own transmission system and spoke directly to both fleets. Human commanders, what you are seeing are records of the War of Succession that ended our own dark age over 10,000 years ago. The attackers in those images are not modern Korvax, but an extinct militant faction that nearly destroyed our own civilization. We defeated them and have spent the last 10 millennia rebuilding according to principles of peaceful exploration and mutual cooperation. The silence that followed was broken by Dr. Carter, who had been analyzing the visual records from both sides. Admiral, the ship designs in the ancient human records do match Korvax technology, but they're from a completely different era. It's like judging modern Earth by the actions of ancient warriors. Commander Martinez was struggling with information that challenged everything she had believed for thousands of years. Her preserved consciousness had been sustained by the desire for revenge against the aliens who had destroyed her world. Now she was being told that those aliens were long dead and that their descendants were trying to build a peaceful galaxy. Atlas, run a comparison analysis of the alien vessels in our historical records against the current Korvax fleet configurations. The AI's response came back quickly, but it brought no comfort to the ancient commander. Analysis complete, Commander. The current Korvax vessels show significant technological and design evolution compared to the attacking forces in our records. Probability that these are the same faction, less than 12%. Ambassador Hayes, who had been listening to the exchange from the diplomatic shuttle, made a decision that would either save the situation or make it infinitely worse. Commander Martinez, I request permission to come aboard your vessel. I believe there are things you need to see and things we need to understand about what really happened to the first human empire. The request was so unexpected that Martinez hesitated before responding. Atlas immediately began running security protocols to determine if allowing the modern humans aboard posed any risk to the ship or its mission. Ambassador Hayes, why would? You want to board a ship whose commander you believe is preparing to attack your homeworld. Hayes looked at the massive ancient vessel on his display screen and realized he was about to bet everything on his ability to convince a woman who had been dead for 10,000 years to trust him. Because, Commander, I think you and your people are the key to understanding what really happened to human civilization. And I think we're all in danger from something much worse than ancient misunderstandings. Dr. Griffin had been working to understand the energy signatures from the awakening ships when he made a discovery that changed everything. Admiral, I'm detecting activation signals from locations throughout the galaxy, but some of these signatures don't match the ships we've seen. There are other types of vessels waking up, and their energy patterns suggest they're much more heavily armed. Martinez granted Hayes permission to board the HMS Vengeance, but only after Atlas had run extensive security scans. The ancient ships. Docking Bay was a cathedral of metal and technology that made the ambassador feel like he was stepping into humanity's forgotten dreams. The preserved commander met him at the airlock, her form projected through the ship's holographic systems. She appeared as a woman in her 40s, wearing a uniform that combined military authority with the elegant design sensibilities of a civilization that had conquered the stars. Ambassador Hayes, welcome aboard the Vengeance. I hope you understand that what you see here represents the pinnacle of human achievement. We built ships that could cross the galaxy in days, weapons that could reshape matter at the atomic level, and civilizations that spanned hundreds of worlds. Hayes walked through corridors lined with displays showing the glory of the first human empire. Massive space stations orbiting distant suns, terraformed worlds covered in human cities, fleets of ships that dwarfed anything in modern space. It was beautiful and terrible at the same time. Commander, what happened to all of this? How did humanity go from ruling the galaxy to barely leaving our home system? Martinez's holographic form flickered with what might have been pain. That, Ambassador, is what we've been trying to understand since we awakened. Atlas has been analyzing the historical records from your ship's database, and what we've found suggests that the First Empire didn't fall to alien invasion. It fell to itself. They reached the ship's command center, where Atlas displayed a three-dimensional map of the galaxy showing the locations of awakening fleets. Hayes gasped as he saw the scope of what they were dealing with. Hundreds of ships scattered across dozens of systems, all coming online after 10,000 years of sleep. The Civil War began over the question of genetic purity, Martinez continued. One faction believed that humans should remain unchanged as they spread across the galaxy. The other faction embraced adaptation, allowing human colonies to evolve and change based on the worlds they inhabited. Hayes felt a chill as he began to understand the implications. The aliens you fought weren't aliens at all, were they? They were human colonies that had evolved beyond what the Empire considered acceptable. Atlas has confirmed your hypothesis, Ambassador. The attacking forces in our historical records show genetic markers that are clearly human in origin, but modified for survival on different types of worlds. We were fighting our own children, and we were too proud and too angry to see it. The revelation hit Hayes like a physical blow. The Great War that had destroyed the first human empire hadn't been humanity against aliens. It had been humanity against itself, with one side trying to preserve genetic purity while the other embraced change and adaptation. But some of your people survived, Hayes said. Earth hung in space like a blue jewel, unaware that 6 ancient warships were approaching with the power to end human civilization. Admiral Morrison watched the tactical display aboard the USS Columbia as the rogue ships from the first human empire closed in on humanity's homeworld. Admiral Earth Defense Command is reporting that they've never seen anything like these vessels. Nancy Parker reported from her communications station. The ancient ships are ignoring all hail attempts, and their shields are deflecting every scan we try to run on them. Commander Martinez stood in the holographic projection chamber aboard the HMS Vengeance, trying to convince her fellow commanders to abandon their mission. But Captain Ryan Cooper of the HMS Retribution was not interested in listening to reason. "Elena, you've been deceived by these primitive humans and their alien friends." Cooper's voice came through the communication system. "Earth has clearly been corrupted by alien influence. Look at their technology. Look at their weak attempts at space travel. This is not the humanity we swore to protect." Martinez felt the frustration of trying to argue with someone whose consciousness had been preserved in the same state of anger and hatred that had driven the Civil War 10,000 years ago. "Ryan, we were wrong about the war. The aliens we fought were our own people, evolved and adapted to different worlds. The real enemy was our own inability to accept change." "That's exactly what someone under alien influence would say," Cooper replied coldly. "Atlas, maintain course for Earth. Prepare to remove the corrupted leadership and restore proper human authority." Ambassador Hayes worked frantically with Dr. Griffin and the Korvax scientists to find some way to stop the approaching ships. The weapon systems on the ancient vessels were beyond anything either modern humans or the Korvax could match. If the rogue ships decided to attack Earth, nothing in the solar system could stop them. "Dr. Griffin, what about the quantum singularities that power these ships?" Hayes asked desperately. "Is there any way to disrupt them?" Griffin shook his head. "The technology is too advanced for us to interfere with directly. But I've been studying the communication protocols between the ships. If we could somehow convince their A is that their mission parameters are wrong, we might be able to get them to stand down." Captain Lisa Brooks had been working with Ben Carter to analyze the historical records from both the First Empire ships and the Korvax archives. What they found was a pattern of misunderstanding and miscommunication that had led to the destruction of the greatest human civilization in history. "Admiral, I think I've found something," Brooks announced. "The Korvax have historical records that go back to the time of the First Empire, but they call it something different. They refer to it as the Age of Division, when the galaxy was torn apart by a civil war between the pure strain and the adapted." Morrison leaned forward in his command chair. "What do their records say about how the war ended?" "According to the Korvax, the pure strain forces withdrew to hidden bases throughout the galaxy and went into some kind of hibernation. The adapted colonies eventually evolved into the various species we see today, including the Korvax themselves. But the really important part is this. The war ended when both sides realized they were destroying everything they claimed to be fighting for." Dr. Carter looked up from his translation work, his eyes bright with excitement. "Admiral, I think the Korvax records might contain the actual peace treaty that ended the First Empire Civil War. If we can transmit that to the ancient ships, it might override their combat protocols." On Earth, President Karen Turner stood in the situation room deep beneath the Capitol, watching as the most advanced ships humanity had ever seen approached her world with unknown intentions. The reports from Admiral Morrison painted a picture of ancient human technology that made Earth's defenses look like children's toys. "Madam President, we have 6 minutes until the unknown vessels reach Earth orbit," reported General Frank Walker. "Our satellites are detecting massive energy buildups that suggest they're preparing to fire." Turner looked at the faces around the table, knowing that she might be about to make the last decision in human history. "Have we had any success in communicating with them?" "No, ma'am. They're broadcasting on frequencies we can barely detect, using a language that's related to English, but evolved in ways our computers can't fully translate." Commander Martinez made a desperate decision aboard the HMS Vengeance. If she couldn't convince Cooper and the other rogue commanders to stand down, she would have to stop them by force. The irony wasn't lost on her that she was about to fight against her own people to protect the very aliens she had once sworn to destroy. Atlas set course to intercept the HMS Retribution. Charge weapons, but do not lock on target until I give specific orders. Commander, are you certain about this course of action? Captain Cooper represents legitimate First Empire authority. Martinez felt the weight of 10,000 years of mistakes settling on her shoulders. At TLA, sometimes authority is wrong. Sometimes the mission parameters need to change. Today, we choose the future over the past. The space battle that followed was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Ancient human ships, armed with weapons that could unmake matter at the quantum level, engaged each other while Earth's population watched their skies fill with impossible lights. Commander Martinez had the advantage of surprise, but Captain Cooper had the advantage of numbers. The HMS Retribution was supported by 5 other ships whose commanders believed they were saving humanity from corruption and alien influence. Elena, you've made your choice, Cooper broadcasted as his ship's weapons. Systems targeted the Vengeance. You've chosen the aliens over your own species. History will remember you as a traitor. History will remember me as someone who learned from her mistakes. Martinez replied as she ordered Atlas to return fire. The weapon that struck the HMS Retribution didn't destroy the ship, but it disabled its main engines and left it drifting. In space above Earth, the other rogue ships hesitated, unsure whether to continue their attack on Earth or engage the Vengeance in battle. That moment of hesitation was all Dr. Griffin needed. Working with Brooks and Carter, he had managed to decode the peace treaty from the Korvax archives and translate it into the ancient human language. The document was broadcast on every frequency the First Empire ships were monitoring. The words that filled the communication channels were spoken in the voice of Admiral Helena Stevens, the last supreme commander of the First Human Empire. Her final message, preserved in Korvax archives for 10,000 years, was simple and heartbreaking. To all commanders of the pure strain forces, this is Admiral Stevens. The war is over. We were wrong. The species we have been fighting are not aliens but our own children, evolved and adapted to life among the stars. By the time you receive this message, I will be dead and the Empire will be history. Learn from our mistakes. Choose unity over purity. Choose the future over the past. The effect on the ancient ships was immediate. Atlas and the other A's began running verification protocols on the message, while the preserved commanders struggled to understand what they were hearing. Admiral Stevens had been revered as the greatest hero of the pure strain cause. If she had declared the war to be wrong, then everything they had believed was built on lies. Captain Cooper's voice came over the communication system, and now it carried a note of confusion and doubt. Elena, is this message authentic? Martinez closed her holographic eyes, feeling the weight of truth settling over her like a burial shroud. Yes, Ryan, it's authentic. We've been fighting ghosts and shadows while the galaxy moved on without. U.S. One by one, the rogue ships powered down their weapon systems and took up peaceful orbits around Earth. The crisis was over, but the questions it raised would change humanity forever. In the weeks that followed, representatives from the First Empire ships met with Earth leaders and Korvax diplomats to begin the process of building a new galactic civilization. The ancient ships possessed technology that could transform human society, but they also carried the wisdom of failure and the knowledge of what happened when a species chose division over unity. Commander Martinez chose to remain active, serving as humanity's ambassador to the galaxy while working to heal the wounds left by the ancient civil war. Some of the other preserved commanders chose to return to hibernation, unable to adapt to a galaxy so different from the one they remembered. But a few ships, led by commanders who couldn't accept the new reality, disappeared into deep space. They carried with them the most advanced human technology ever created and a burning hatred for the galaxy that had forgotten their sacrifice. Earth stepped onto the galactic stage not as conquerors, but as partners, armed with incredible technology, but humbled by the knowledge of what their ancestors' pride had cost. The first human empire was gone forever, but perhaps something better could rise from its ashes. The galaxy would remember the day when humanity's past tried to destroy its future and chose instead to embrace it. It would be known as the Day of Awakening, when the dead learned to live again, and the living learned from the dead. And somewhere in the darkness between the stars, the last believers in the pure strain cause plotted their return, waiting for the day when they could complete the mission that Admiral Stevens had abandoned. Th.